Hi everybody, Bro Movies! Welcome to the team here. Hi, I'm Gavin and this is
James.
And we are here with our second film review, which is another love movie of ours called The Lost Boys. A 1987 epic directed by Joel Schumacher with a fantastic cast, a heavenly soundtrack and a great team behind it. So we want to kind of pass on our love of this movie for you, try to highlight some of the wonderful bits of the movie, some of the stories around it, and maybe some of the background of the movie. And some of its legacy of the movie as well. So James, maybe give us some background for this wonderful movie. I think beforehand we should say that this movie is a 15th movie. There are some gory scenes, so just parental advisory. No, there's no nudity, I suppose, James. But I think, I think people have their heads ripped off, etc. So we just need to be careful there. And obviously, none of the clips we have will have any scary scenes in them. So I think in respect to this movie, James, maybe set out some background for the movie and where it came from and how it came to be put together in such a wonderful classical movie.
So the original script was written by Janice Fisher and James Jeremiah as two first-time screenwriters, and it was sold to PSO in 1986. PSO were behind many great movies, Short Circuit, Fire and Ice, Never Ending Story, Flight the Navigator, many classic films, I think even Police Academy. And it was sold to them, and then Richard Donner was originally going to direct, and it was originally very similar to The Goonies, and the vampires were going to be 12-year-olds, and it was going to be a comedy or a comedy drama, and that didn't work out, and Richard Donner worked on Lethal Weapon, but he still stayed on as an executive producer with his friend and fellow producer Harvey Bernard.
Yeah, so he stayed in then, and on the team they put together for this movie, James, you also had... Michael Chapman, who has worked with Martin Scorsese on a number of Michael Chapman on Martin Scorsese and Raging Bull. I think he'd taken a 4-year career break before this movie, and I think he came in, and you can see his work in this movie. It's a marvelously photographed movie.
Cinematography.
Some great scenes, even as they're around the vampire, as the camera approaches the cliff face in a kind of scary
Dutch
manner.
Angles and fast zooms.
Yeah, exactly. And then in relation to the script, that came together quite quickly, James, did it?
So when Joel Schumacher came on board, he didn't really like the script. He suggested it was actually his idea to make the vampires much older and kind of sexier and to really make it a semi-adult movie. And he brought on Jeffrey Boam, who had written Inner Space and The Dead Zone at the time. And he basically rewrote the script from top to bottom and to Joel Schumacher's demands, and that's when the story really came together, and it really was initiated by Joel Schumacher and Jeffrey Boam. They really created the film as we know it today, but Joel Schumacher has said that some of the Frog Brothers dialogue was kind of retained, even though it was, the characters did evolve quite a bit.
Yeah, they did. And in relation to that, then they came together with a young cast, a great cast. So you've got Kiefer Sutherland in the main role, and what other character actors do we have in the movie, James?
Well, we have Edward Herrmann, who at that point wasn't really a well-known actor. He still, unfortunately passed away about 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
But he was never really well-known during his lifetime, and he was in many great performances. The same year he was in Lost Boys, he was in Overboard, which a lot of people hate, but our mum actually loves Overboard, for anyone that wants to know that.
Goldie Hawn, Kurt Russell epic.
Yeah.
So, and then also you had a number of very, very famous child actors who were famous at the time. Corey Haim and Corey Feldman.
Who would go on to appear in many films together, like License to Drive, Dream a Little Dream. Yeah. They even started a television series together.
And for the younger viewers of this, Corey Haim was a hugely popular actor at the time.
And he was a really good actor as well. He had some very good performances.
He had a difficult life, and sadly has also passed since. So you had Jason Patrick as well in a leading role. Jason, who had a lot of fame as well. So he had one of the lead roles in the gang. And then, you have a wonderful actor playing the grandfather in the film
Bernard
as well, James.
Hughes played the grandfather, and he was, of course, in Tron 5 years later, playing Walter Gibbs in Tron, and he was really good in that movie, but in this he's just wonderful, and there's so many great lines. He drives a car and he has a big horn, and he always has stuffed animals. He's a hunter.
Well, I think he's the person that gets the most action in the movie with Widow Johnson. I think he's always had fun, even though he uses washing up liquid for aftershave. I think he still doesn't have any risk.
No, and he drives around in an old car with stuffed animals. I wouldn't really
Yeah.
find that very...
And his horn as well, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah,
He's almost
going
like
off-
a clown. He could
he
pass
is,
as a...
but a marvelous character, and as we talk about later on, he had many
Yeah.
many pivotal roles in the film, and also many wonderful lines in the film.
Yeah, I love the line where she says, "Are we having guests over? I can't believe it." And
Yeah.
Diane West's character says, "But Dad, you haven't had anyone here for like 7 years." And he
Yeah.
said, "But but there's still company. That's the point."
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
implying that-
Or when he tells Sam about or Michael about the rule about filling the car with petrol at a
Yes.
very high point as they're carrying a couple of the characters up the stairs to save
and
their
he
lives.
doesn't notice at
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
But
yeah.
he probably does because it's mentioned that he's a vampire hunter.
Yeah.
So he's probably just playing along and he kind of knows that something's up.
So
And-
maybe just to develop things on then, the film begins then as you see a family, and again you notice again there's no father figure in the family. We're going back to E.T. where you have a missing father figure
Yeah.
in a family.
Divorced.
A recently divorced Diane Wiest, of course, a wonderful actress who went on to win an
Terrific.
Oscar and has
very well deserved.
a wonderful actress as well. She's driving her two sons
And the
through.
dog Nanook.
Nanook, who is again a fan. A lot of great dogs in this movie, as
Yeah.
we see throughout. Into the place, as I can see my T-shirt here, Santa Carla, not Santa Clara. I think there was a bit of resistance to using the name Santa Clara. I think the real life town of Santa Cruz in California
Yeah,
was
that's where
used.
they filmed it.
The film, and you can do the Lost Boys tour now if you're ever lucky enough to get over to that part of town.
There are, of course, no vampires. And
Yeah, well,
it's not the murder
who
capital
knows?
of the world.
Who knows?
But
I think the bridge is a bit outside town, and that's a separate trip itself. But I think the Santa Cruz boardwalk is very much still there, and the roller coaster. So, but then we move on the movie. Then the family moves in. They're making the usual attempts to kind of get to know the locals. But then maybe James mentioned, what happens in some of the early scenes and what we think
so
about
the
it.
film kind of opens with a hovering shot over the Santa Clara boardwalk with Cry Little Sister playing.
We have that we will mention separately, but
Yeah.
this is just a
Terrific
film
song.
blessed with a sensational soundtrack.
Yeah.
Gerald McMahon now with Cry Little Sister, which is a song repeated a lot throughout the movie. But maybe go on to
And
that.
In Our
James.
House.
Yes, that's another story. But yeah,
For another episode. But basically it opens with the vampires on a roller coaster, on a carousel, and they're walking around, and something's kind of up, and then they're sort of touching a girl's face, and her boyfriend comes up and tries to attack them, and then a guard comes by and holds David in kind of a headlock, and then he says, "All right, boys, let's go," and they leave, and then as we see him walking to his car, we see them kind of flying, and then he looks in terror, and then they presumably pick him up and kill him, and swoop him out of the air, and
Swooping
then
out the air.
they meet the couple who they were with earlier, the couple who they were like touching the girlfriend's face, and then they're making out, and then all of a sudden they tear them out of their car and kill them, and then the next scene opens with what's the song?
And I think Echo and the Bunnymen feature now in their soundtrack song "People Are Strange," the Great Doors song, James.
Yeah, and that plays over one of the second scenes, the scene after the one on the boardwalk. It shows people kind of walking around and missing posters, so it sets the atmosphere of the scene. And
there's a funny atmosphere. You've got the sunny, beachy resorts, but then you've got sad people.
Underlying sort of, something's not right. You know that.
Yeah.
Is something not right about this place, and we see Sam and his mother and Michael and Nanook driving to their grandparents' house, and as they get there, we see him lying on the porch, and then she's like, "Oh no, Dad," and then Michael said he's probably playing dead, and he says, "From what I heard, I'm doing a pretty damn good job." And he gets up and tells her, "You're the only woman who I know that's gotten divorced who never took it to court." And she said, legal battle wouldn't improve anyone's situation.
So then develop on then, and I think Michael then fixes his eyes on Star at another amazing scene, and again another song that is played very regular in our house is Tim Capello and I Still Believe.
Tina Turner.
He's had a good career, and again another man lured back to the soundtrack as well for the film. He gives a very saxophone heavy performance there at the show, and at that then I think Star is sighted then with Michael, and then an obsession, near obsession comes to light then. As they go around the fair as well, you've got the excitement of the fair. But it then becomes apparent that she's also part of Kiefer Sutherland's gang, I think, James, isn't that right?
And meanwhile, Diane West is looking for a job, and then she meets Max at this video shop, and there's a little kid, and she says, "Where's your mom?" And he says, "I don't know." And then she walks in and says, "Excuse me, this kid doesn't know where his mom is." And the mom comes in, and David and his gang are in the video shop, presumably looking to kidnap the child. And then their mother comes in, and they're sort of loitering, and then Diane West is talking to Max. He's looking for a job, and David and his gang come around, and he said, "I thought I told you not to come here." And then they kind of laugh and walk out.
They do, yeah. And you've Alex Winter, who went on to fame then with Bill and Ted.
I think 2 years later.
He's a goofy-eyed villain in this movie, and as part of the gang, had a few lines and is in the film throughout as well. Around this time as well, of the movie, James, a couple of characters who we both love, the Frog Brothers, make a wonderful appearance. And you see them, they're comic-loving kind of bandits, but they come on to have heroic status in the movie. So they take the Corey Haim character under their wings, don't they?
They do, and when they first see him, he's wearing like he looked like he just stepped out of Hawaii, and then
a truly amazing long body length jacket, I would call it, or cardigan.
It's probably like 40 centimeters too long for him.
Yeah.
They said he's a fashion victim.
Got a problem, guys? Just scope in your civilian wardrobe. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
And they see him, and then they said Santa Carla is a great place if you're a Martian, and then Corey Feldman says if you're a vampire.
Yeah.
And he of course thinks they're loonies, and their parents are behind the desk kind of sleeping. They look like hippies, and they said here, and they give him a vampire comic, and they said think of it more as a survival manual. And he of course thinks these guys are nuts, and then they tell him, we fight for true justice in the American way. They tell him to ring them if he ever has any problems with vampires, and he says, I hope I never have to ring you. And
but then more and more, without his knowledge, then Michael is coming under Star's kind of bewitchment, I suppose. I think it's Jamie Gertz is in this, and Jamie is obviously a stunningly attractive actress, and she went on to act in Twister. She's actually more famous now. She owns an NBA basketball team with her husband Eric, and they have a share in the Milwaukee Brewers.
It's a shame she's married as well.
I know, but
crushing everyone's dreams.
Keep this a family show. So then, and then if we move on, then as they say, I think Michael is now becomes under the bewitchment of the gang. Let's say they asked him to go on a bicycle chase and bring him back to their cave, so to speak. Where they kind of play a few mind tricks on him, don't they, with maggots?
Mind hallucinations, and it looks like he's eating maggots. Maybe he's just eating rice. From their point, they're just, it's not actually happening. And they give him a box full of worms, and it's actually noodles. And he drinks some vampire blood, and there's a particularly frightening scene there at Kiefer Sutherland in the maggot scene, and you see this light just reflecting on him, and he's like, drink my blood, Mike, and it's so creepy. Kiefer Sutherland's on the screen, he's just incredible. Like,
he's brilliant. He's a brilliant performance.
And he had just been in Stand By Me at the time. He was in a movie, I believe, with Sean Penn, and it's some courtroom drama, and he said that Joel Schumacher saw a final scene where you saw Sean Penn walk by him in the courtroom, and he had like brown hair then, and he said he just looked at him with this horrifying kind of stare, and Joel Schumacher thought this guy would be great in this movie, and it was like, I think, a second or third film, and he's just wonderful in it. But anyways, then he drinks the vampire blood, and then goes with them under a train, and it's another pilgrimage site, I think, for followers of the fan. It's a little outside Santa Cruz as well. And they ultimately all take a
a leap of faith, let's say, underneath the bridge in a legendary scene.
Yeah.
And then I think Michael wakes up back in his bed, but he's taking on all the manifestations of
He has to wear
someone who's
sunglasses, and he's like been asleep for hours.
he's like someone who's been going to Rag Week in college for 2 months. But
or like Sean in our house.
yeah,
who
well,
sleeps all
he
day.
sleeps all day. Yeah. So his eyes, and he shows some aggressive traits, and I think the dog makes a great appearance in the movie now.
He comes up to Sam, who's singing in the bath, obviously, and then Nuke jumps and attacks Michael and bites his hand. And then Sam learns that he's a vampire, and it leads to a sort of darkly comedic scene. It's like, my brother's a blood-sucking vampire. Wait till I tell more about this.
And the Frog Brothers recommend instant termination of his brother, but there is some brotherly love still for the vampire, so that doesn't happen, thankfully. Albeit, I think doesn't Michael take a journey outside the window for a while when
he starts
Sam was on the phone to his... and I think there's an ongoing funny whereby the various dates between Diane Weiss and Edward Herrmann are always interrupted by the kids with various issues.
He's like sitting in this restaurant drinking wine, and then she leaves, and he looks at her, and as she's running to her car, because she thinks Sam is being attacked, and then they go have a meal at his house, his very extravagant house with his dog Torn, who, in one scene, Diane West comes to give him flowers.
But that was probably, I think, well, we can talk about why that happened, but it's probably connected to the fact that the dog was trying to protect the identity of its owner as probably the head vampire. But maybe to go back one step, I think they then try and get to the bottom of the vampire gang that's there, because I think Sam is anxious to get Michael back to being his normal brother.
And then in one scene, after David goes to this beach, and there are these surf Nazis there, the gang, and then they're like dancing and doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and then David and the gang reveal themselves as vampires. They have teeth and eyes, and they massacre them and tear them apart, and then Michael's screaming, and you see his eyes light up, and he
does, but he stands back. You can still see he's a bit tortured there as well. And throughout, again, he's going back to the wonderful soundtrack is here, which is just full of...
Thomas Newman did the soundtrack.
Thomas Newman did, James. And I think both...
I always get him confused with Taven Newman. All these other...
I think so, yeah.
Randy Newman.
There's too many Newmans,
It's bizarre.
But no, on that as well, I think Joel Schumacher promised a lot of bands kind of... he would direct their videos, because I know INXS were promised it. I think he did direct an INXS video later on. And you've got amazing things like Roger Daltrey, as you know, sings over the end credits as well. A wonderful song that Joe McMahon obviously was a sensational brother and sister. And it's just a wonderful thing. And it's also the imagery throughout the movie. You've got Jim Morrison's picture in the cave as well. And then you've good pop imagery, the Reform Girls poster or school poster in Corey Haim's bedroom as well throughout the movie. But maybe then to come on, you've got the main thing, and then is to try to save Michael before preferably he goes to the dark side. So there's then one of the many wonderful scenes. There's the family dinner where the Frog Brothers invite themselves along with Sam to a romantic date in the grandfather's house. I think the grandfather's off with
Well, he's there, but he's like spying on Max, and they actually, what they did was very clever. They replayed the shot before, and they did that with the opening as well. But in one scene, we see as soon as Max comes in, Gamma kind of stares at him eating an apple, going like this, and behind his Arumi stores his antlers, because like I say, he's an animal enthusiast.
He is, and they come in handy near the end, don't they, James?
They do. We won't spoil it, but
and the Parmesan cheese they replace with garlic and overload that, but it still doesn't work.
They spill water in his lap. They turn the lights off and reflect light onto his face, and
but they'd forgotten that they had invited him into the house, and I think
Michael invited him. You never invite a head vampire into your house. That's kind of the rule was broken.
The rule was broken. It was all to vain then.
What's the matter with you? Spur?
And now we the plan of the Frog Brothers then moves on then, and there's a decision then to try a daytime invasion of the vampires' cave, James. And,
and then Michael says to him, he's like hugging Sam and says, "I love you," and it's very nice. He says, "Don't go in there because you'll get hurt." And then he says, "Where'd you find these guys from?" Because he's very skeptical about the Frog Brothers.
Or the Frog Brothers said, we don't travel with vampires, and they said, well, you want to walk? Well, we do now. You know, they're kind of, the Frog Brothers are notional, so they're geared to the hilt. So they then invade the cave, where they discover Kiefer Sutherland and the gang hanging from the roof. So
sleeping.
Yeah.
Nocturnal.
Having their doze. So I think they stake one or two of them through the heart, don't they?
They stake one of the vampires, Marco, and then David wakes up and utters the immortal line,
another
dead meat. And,
yeah.
which is actually a line a lot of horror films have.
They do,
really.
yeah. No harm. Flattery is a great form. But they make their escape then, so they don't successfully...
they burn David's hand barely. They barely make it out alive.
So then they move on out then and make their way and they make their escape from the cave. So after the invasion of the cave, it now becomes apparent that the final scene of the movie will be coming up very shortly. And it's going to be a set two between the rival vampire gang and the forces of good. I think Diane Weiss and Ed Herman are heading off for a dinner date in Ed Herman's house then, at which she mentions that maybe I think Max had come into her in the video shop to say something about vampires, and he seemed to genuinely hold a view. But she seemed to still think it was a little bit funny, but a bit of a joke. But then in the background, I think things are developing in the home house at the same time, James.
They're preparing for an invasion, and they make steaks and crush onions and so forth. They fill the
garlic and fill the bath with garlic.
The bath with that. They fill like water pistols with holy water. There's a comedic scene where they go into a church and steal all. They put like
baptism, I think, in this. Yeah.
And they just leave and say bye, and all these people are.
The Frog Brothers again waves to their audience, and I think Star and Laddie appear then as well, and I think Laddie has a bit of he turns into a vampire at one stage, and they call him Edward Munch, I think. But I think they appear, and she tells Michael and Sam that the gang are on the way and they need to prepare themselves. So there's a Titanic scene of the kind of windswept house in the top of the hill as we wait for them to arrive, and they eventually do arrive.
And Sam, I believe, runs out, and then Michael runs after him because Nanook has gotten caught in the fence, and then they take him out, and they're like, Michael, run, and Sam, and they're closing in on them, and then they're getting closer, and Sam trips, and then Michael carries him, and they barely make it in the house, and then they prepare, and they actually, I think, turn the power off. And there's a bit of an explosion. One of the vampires jumps from the fireplace.
I think they come in through the fireplace, I think, eventually. So the some wonderful fight scenes then throughout. Bit of schlock horror. I don't think it's truly a scary. Not pure horror, I think, James.
No, it's kind of a black comedy.
Really. Comedic. Like, you some great lines like Corey Haim at one stage.
Death
by Stereo, isn't it? Yeah. Where one character is knocked into an old stereo machine as well. So one by one the vampire gangs fall through, and then when Kiefer Sutherland and Michael have a wonderful fight, that then ends with I think Kiefer expiring on an antler that Grandad was keeping.
Impaled on some deer antlers, and you slowly you barely notice it. You actually see him de-aging, so he loses his beard and
but then Michael doesn't come back
and
to
then
life.
You're like, what? I mean, I thought he was the head vampire, because how would Max be the vampire if nothing worked? And then he shows up, and then he looks at David, and then Lucy is like, oh my god, are you all okay? And who's this? Because Star appears, and they never meet face to face until now. And then Max comes in and takes off his glasses and says, Lucy, my boys, I'm so sorry about this mess. And she says, what do you mean? And he says, you never invite a head vampire into your house. And was I not invited? And then he turns into a vampire and said, I haven't changed my mind about you, Lucy, and we could all be one big happy family, and holds Sam in a deadlock and says so he wants to turn Lucy into a vampire, and then sort of sire her and
approach him for the neck, and then there's a struggle before he gets his dastardly teeth into her neck. And then you hear
that the greatest scene in the whole film. You hear the horns coming through, and the grandpa bursts in through their doors, and then a big log impales Max and he goes flying into the fireplace.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
grandpa just walks out and heads
That's
towards
brilliant.
the fridge, and then
The second shelf in the fridge, and now he said the second shelf in the fridge
his own
was
shelf.
his root beer, and everyone's
Oreos.
stay with this Oreos exactly, and root beer. And then you might think there's going to be a couple more minutes left in the movie, but no, there's not. And I think
and then he goes and takes out a beer and utters one of the best lines in the movie. He says, "You know, one of the things I could never get about Santa Carla was all those damn vampires."
yeah, it's a brilliant
and
line.
then the scene just
As the family just look at them, and I think you just leave it at, and say Roger Daltrey then appears, and you just the memory of those wonderful songs, a great story, well acted by the entire ensemble
very
cast.
good cinematography, very good. Very good score, like you said, with music and direction from Joel Schumacher.
Joel Schumacher went on to have a wonderful career, everything from some of the Batman
and
movies.
Robin, Phantom of the Opera, but he started out working on films like The Wiz. He wrote the screenplay for that, and then worked in The Incredible Shrinking Woman with Lily Tomlin, and then worked on, I think, DC Cab with Mr. T, and then did St. Elmo's Fire, and then was brought on to do this movie.
Yeah, and he did a fine job.
Flatliners, he also did Nick of Time, Falling Down.
Loads of movies. Rocky Kieran over here. He came to Ireland to make a movie as well. I think a short movie, relatively short. I think around the mid-90s. It kept ticking along. A great story, and I think it's a movie, as he said, we went to see in the Lighthouse Cinema. It really does stand
Wonderful
up.
cinema in Dublin. You have to go there.
It's
great.
35 years later. And as you say, when you look back, some actors went on to, have difficult up and down years in between. Kiefer Sutherland did, and went on to fantastic success in recent years. Through 24 and
Jamie
some TV series.
Newlander, who played one of the Frog Brothers, he appeared, I think, a year later in the Blob remake.
Yeah, and we're also not allowed to mention the sequels to the great movie, which we cannot comment on.
They don't exist; they're just disgraceful.
I think, I think Grandad kind of becomes a vampire.
And then Sam is to kill him, and then Sam turns into a vampire. And
we won't talk. We just need to focus in on this epic movie, a soundtrack from the heavens, as they say, which also does bear up to wonderful.
It is very 80s, but that's the best part about it.
Yeah, and it shows the way the music is threaded throughout. And a great movie, well acted, and I think it's one that we both love, James, and that's why we wanted to add it to our show. And
it has a cult following, and I believe at the time it didn't get a huge amount of critical. Because the late Roger Ebert didn't really like it a huge amount, but now it's gone on to.
I think it's in the Rotten Tomatoes 70 to 75% threshold, which I always view.
Well, Rotten Tomatoes are just fat 40-year-olds on a computer. They're not real critics, really.
But no, it really is one we love, and I think it's one that really does benefit from a rewatching. And hopefully, if part of our function here at Bubba Bro Movies is to let you know of movies that we love and adore, so that hopefully other viewers can get a chance to watch it when they can in an age-appropriate manner. So thank you again for watching and listening to us again. We look forward to reviewing upcoming movies. We're having an internal discussion. The team will be our next movie.
Yeah, we'll let you all know in the comments.
Yeah, or else we'll only have one of us. But no, it'll be.
I'm being sacked. Really. I have to clear my office in an hour.
No. There's none of that. It'll be sacked next week. So it's either be the Highlander or the Third Man, I think. But it'll be both movies, and again a movie that we'll love. So I hope you've enjoyed our review.
You enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
and subscribe, comment if you can.
Absolutely.
We'll respond to every comment.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for all your support.
Yeah.
Despite this is only our second video, it means a lot to us, and we love uploading videos and hope that we provide you with a little bit of entertainment to brighten up your days.
Yeah, and thank you, and bye-bye. Bro Movies, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.